statements to the high level, the I guess the summit itself, and there a few themes. The African countries are still making very clear they're not happy with the outcome regarding UNEP, and I think behind the scenes some people are maybe afraid that they might try to open that part of the outcome. The EC made it clear that they'll keep working on pushing for their preferred position on UNEP, but not at this meeting necessarily. I guess if you're interested in watching kind of UN processes, at the beginning of the meeting yesterday, they established a main committee and appointed John Ashes as the chair of it. And that's the body that normally at a meeting would conduct the negotiations. But since they're hoping that there won't be reopening of the text, it's not likely to meet. If you do see something about the main committee meeting, you'll want to watch that, because that would be the place if somebody wants to reopen the text. That's where they would do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn. I thought I'd just share a few brief thoughts. In the light of the closure of the formal negotiating text, I thought I'd share a few thoughts about where it might be useful to pay some attention in terms of the process now, where NGOs might still have a useful role to keep an eye and maybe approach delegations and tease out what exactly is going on. One of the consequences of the closure of the negotiation, as Secretary of State Spellman mentioned yesterday, was that the ministers who are arriving now are moving very quickly to talk about implementation, obviously not to be reflected in the negotiating text, but talking about the hows and the whys and the wherefores around the outcomes that are flagged in the negotiating text. So they're talking about the SDG process, the mechanism of finance on UNEP, and the high-level political forum. So if your views on implementation and the process, that's something you might still be able to engage your delegations on. Some of the most interesting remarks I felt yesterday came from Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University's Earth Institute. He gave a very downbeat assessment of the intergovernmental process, and even talked about the wasted years since 1992. He was particularly scathing around the outcomes from the legal treaties on climate, biodiversity and desertification. He went so far as to say that none of these treaties had effectively, as he said, turned the dial on these issues. But his overall statement, or his main thrust, was to talk about the essential role now of the Sustainable Development Global Movement providing leadership on these issues, and that he believes that that is one of the main messages coming out of this conference, is that really the baton has been handed over to civil society in a more clear way than ever before. Another place to keep an eye on is the process around the Sustainable Development Goals. Again, Sachs, in a conversation after yesterday's event, we talked about the prospects for what he sees as a smooth transition between the MDGs and the SDGs, both in terms of process, but also in the nature of these goals. He doesn't want to see another Christmas tree of hundreds of goals and detailed documentation. He says that the test of the effectiveness of these goals will be that a school child will be able to memorize them, be inspired by them, and act on them, just as the MDGs have penetrated the school curriculum in many parts of the world. And he says there's a very narrow window of opportunity for the social movement, for the NGOs, to influence this debate and ensure that it doesn't become caught up and mangled by the intergovernmental process. There are opportunities to do that in the period now leading up to the special session of the UNGA, when we have the final review of the MDGs. Just one last point. which is of interest or will be of interest to you. I'm aware that there's been a discussion around the transition from the dialogues to the high-level roundtables. You know that a number of the recommendations from these very interesting dialogues that have happened involving all of the stakeholders. These recommendations are now going forward to the roundtables, but there's a question about how these will be reflected, these very valuable recommendations will be reflected in the outcome of the conference. It's not clear what the intentions of the host country are at this stage, but it's something you might want to ask your delegations about and make sure that the outcome does justice to the work that went into that process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this, as usual, extremely efficient and concise and very useful update. I somehow sense implementation, you know, that people are already moving into the post-review, which I think is fantastic, isn't it? Because this document is very much a starting point, and what we need to do now is keep up the momentum and make it better, improve it in terms of what it's going to bring us for implementation. Colleagues, any questions, any doubts, any comments on this first point of the agenda, which is, as you know, related to the works?
Yep.
Yes, please, over there. Any other hands, so I can already take two in a shot. That's good. You don't need to. Okay, second. But I am not asking you to all raise your hands, so it's very good that we just have a couple, okay? Thank you very much. So please, you first, and then you.
I'll just speak up.
I'll give him the floor first, the time you move to another mic?
Yeah.
Thank you. Please.
Okay, Fermin up, International Society of Doctors for the... just Peter, for your concise briefing there. I'm just wondering what you feel. I felt that there was a very palpable engagement now with business. Businesses are opening out to civil society, and I feel that this could be a link, a very strong link that we could move forward sustainable development with. It seems that they really are in many ways ahead of civil society and governments in actively trying to make the change. And I just wondered whether you've got the same feeling or not, or what was your view on that?
So, ready now? Thank you. Thanks for the microphone.
I was wondering, you said very briefly that there was an opportunity for civil society and social movements to be involved in the development of the Sustainable Development Goals in the lead up to the UNGA review of the MDGs. Just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how that might actually occur. What sort of ways can we put into these form of development?
Yeah, well, I think it's true, but you have the full spectrum of business interests, but it's true that there are, not on the margins of the conference, but in taking part in the dialogues and in many of the events, there's that sense of frustration and distance between the intergovernmental process and what's actually happening on the ground is equally felt within parts of business. There's no doubt that there are allies there in taking the agenda forward. We just heard this morning, for example, that a number of countries are going to work and move ahead on corporate reporting, for example. There's been an announcement by the UK on reporting on carbon emissions in the business sector as well. So I think it's true that parts of business are clearly moving ahead. And if you look at some of the statements by Ivo de Boer about when they're coming into Rio, he's making the same point, that it's really time to no longer regard the government process as a source of innovation and leadership. We need it for legitimacy, for registering what's happening, but it's no longer the place for innovation, and we can't afford to wait around. Thanks.
On the involvement of civil society in the MDG review, it's open for any accredited organisation. It's up to you to participate and throw your energy into it. There is a structure already in operation. As you know, the UNDP has very heavy hand in this, has always been responsible for the MDGs. And there's also established a high-level panel which is headed by none other than David Cameron. It's also supported by Liberia and Indonesia. This is an expert group that will feed into this. There's every reason for all accredited members of civil society to get involved in this, because this is also about our future. There's nothing stopping it except lack of energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take another 3 hands that I've seen and a 4th one, and we're going to leave it there. So 1 hand there, 1 hand there, those 2 first, and then it will be in the second round, that hand there, and you.